Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of the EVOG podcast. I'm Brian G., the EVOG. And as usual for the EVOG podcast, I'm joined by my friend and fellow YouTuber, Adam from Adam's Everything EV. How you doing, Adam?
I'm great. We have been busy doing other things. Obviously, we did a little test drive together recently, and we'll get into that. But it's great to be back in this format. Lots to talk about.
Yeah, there's been a ton of activity, stories, you name it, across the EV landscape. So I'm excited for us to get back into it.
Well, I'm happy to hear your take on a lot of stuff because maybe some of my takes are kind of off the cuff and weird. But you always take a hard line and you have real professional takes. I kind of tend to have crazy opinions, but I'd love to hear all of it. And let's start with kind of one of the coolest things that's happened recently, and that's going to actually be Scout. What do you think about this vehicle, this opportunity? Is it too late? Is it too early? What's your feel here?
So I think it's super cool, right? I love the historical background and story of Scout, and having that make a comeback, and have it make a comeback as a new EV startup, right? I know it's funded by the Volkswagen Group, right, as the sole shareholder, but it's great to see something historical like this make a comeback as an all-electric brand and as a new EV startup. So that's my first initial take. The second part of it is I know that they're using Rivian technology, right, which adds to the cool factor. The third and final point that comes to mind relates to my second point, which is I really don't know how this doesn't hurt Rivian in some respect. I get that they're going to be using and licensing and paying for Rivian's zonal architecture, technology and software stack and so on. But the sort of ethos of adventure vehicle has been Rivian's thing, right? Their brand identity. And so I don't see how this doesn't impact that to some extent.
Yeah, they're almost exactly the same. You're looking at an R1T and an R1S, or maybe an R2S and an R2. I don't understand either why Rivian was okay with this, but maybe they weren't in too great of a negotiating position here. Could that have a part to play?
Potentially, but I don't think so. I think Rivian's probably playing the long game here in terms of opening up another revenue stream. I mean, think about the Rivian delivery van, right? It started out as all Amazon. Then it went to, I believe it was AT&T, right? Was second in line. And now they're expanding that. This has a little bit more nuance to it, given the whole adventure vehicle mantra. But, and I know you're going to get to this, maybe the next item in the rundown, but maybe their calculus is more folks are going to continue to look to Rivian in terms of an all-electric brand, and they'll be looking at Scout more so as a range extender brand.
That definitely could be. Speaking of range extenders, number one, my mom had one of the original Subarus that were available in North America, and she got hung up in the snow, and she had never been hung up in her Subaru. She was really a big Subaru fan at the time because it was new, and she was telling people how great it was in the snow. And then she's stuck on this mountain road, completely unable to move in her Subaru, and here came an international Scout. And not only did he drive by and offer to help, but he hooked her up and pulled her out of the snow. So I've known about the International Scout since I was able to remember, because every year in the wintertime, she would tell that story. So there's nostalgia attached here. And I wish them all the best. The more competition, the better. But as far as that range extender, we can move directly into our next topic, which is range extension a good idea? And right here, I've got the Ram Charger. What are your thoughts on a plug-in hybrid I mean, I know, and there's nuance to that, but how do you feel about a range extended vehicle? Is this something that will get people in to the EV game, or do you think it's just a way to continue to produce engines? What's your take on that?
So I think it's interesting. And before we get too far away from Scout specifically, the last point I would make about that is it's 3 years away, right? And as we'll talk about in this podcast, there's so much going on in the EV world that can you even imagine 3 years from now, right? I know they're telegraphing pricing, starting in the 50s, going as high as maybe 60K. I just don't know. 3 years from now, the landscape is going to be so drastically different that we'll have to keep an eye on them. In terms of range extension, our primary reason for getting a Rivian was to tow our camper, right? We've got a teardrop camper, weighs about 4,500 pounds with all our stuff in it. And we wanted to be able to, as an example, go cross country, right? In our EV, towing our camper. And so that was sort of the primary reason to go down the path of a big battery Rivian R1T. But with a range extender, you get to go through a lot of those charging deserts in the Midwest and the plains and so on out west, and potentially not worry about it. But, that's something that we might do once a decade. So is that really worth having, a vehicle that's got an engine in it? And I get it. The engine isn't for propulsion. It's for recharging the battery. But at the end of the day, it's still an engine. It's going to be driving noise. It's going to be driving vibration and harshness. It's going to be heavily taxed, right? Because in this application, it's going to be going on and off and on and off and on and off from a cold start a lot of times. So I'm intrigued. I would not be an early adopter of that technology. I'd want to at least wait a couple of years and just see how it works. I'd want to test drive it for an extended trip so I can see what that transition from full battery electric to having the engine kick in, just to experience what that's like. But you've had experience actually owning a hybrid. What are your thoughts on it?
The plug-in hybrid is, for me, it increases, and Jim Farley admitted this in that interview with Fully Charged, which we'll get into later. But Jim Farley also admitted this, that plug-in hybrids are future EV customers, because the performance in that range extend mode, whatever you want to call it, whether it's an i3 with a extra range extender, or in my case, I had a plug-in hybrid, which was a kind of a dual powertrain. As soon as that EV experience ends and that engine experience starts, you don't want it anymore. I mean, well, the Clarity had a name. It was called the Angry Bees, because it was such an annoying, it was an Atkinson cycle, which is a different type of engine. It's tailored for efficiency. Of course, we've done 100 years of engineering for noise, vibration, and harshness for engines, but this one is just outside of that realm when it comes to performance. It is noisy. It is harsh. There is a lot of vibration. And I will never, ever go back to a plug-in hybrid. All that car made me want to do, my Clarity, was end all gas consumption immediately. So I hope that is the result. It's just that, like you said, for maybe 5, 6, 10 times in the total ownership of the vehicle, you're paying for an entire powertrain. And I don't see the long-term viability of that. We have to convince people to go electric. And I guess if this is one of the ways, there can be advantages, but it's a hard pass for me on the Ram Charger.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, right? It's a way to convince people to go electric. There's really two major barriers to entry for EV adoption, right? The first one's the charging infrastructure. The second one is the cost, right? The Ram Charger addresses the former and not the latter. right? Because it's still, I mean, those trucks are going to be close to, if not at or above 100K, right? So it's not like it's bringing the price down going to a range extended EV.
Exactly.
So,
And speaking of price, I have a development in my own family, and it's a pretty big deal because obviously I live in a place where EV adoption is very low. You're talking less than 1% in my state. But my cousin has decided to purchase a Tesla. I am going to take him on election day of all days up to the Bridgeville location, and he's going to pick up a new Model Y. And as you can see, he paid less than this $40,000 number on screen. He paid less than that because he used my referral code. He bought one out of inventory. And he's going to be the first person I know out in my family, other than myself and my wife, that have owned an EV. So I'm excited about that. Your first EV was a Tesla, is that right?
yeah, on Valentine's Day 2013, we picked up our brown Model S 60. And that's what got us started on this journey.
So my question to you is, in 2024, did he make the right choice going with a Tesla first? What's your feeling on that?
You can't go wrong going with the benchmark, right? This is the most popular, not just EV, but vehicle in the world, right? So you can't go wrong with this. It's the appliance. I forget which YouTuber called it that. The appliance.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that many times.
Right?
It's got to be out of spec, and if it wasn't, it was said on his channel by someone else, But yeah, I've definitely heard it.
Yeah, it might have even been Doug DeMuro, actually. Now that I think about it,
Yeah, maybe it was.
It's an appliance in that it just works, right? It's great EV tech. It's great infotainment. It's great autonomous driving technology, right? Even if you don't go all the way in and purchase full self-driving, I'm assuming your cousin's not going down that path with the full self-driving.
I recommended him not to because my wife has now had 3 different extended trials of full self-driving since August. They just keep extending it. So she's just had it basically the whole time. There was only like a 2-3 week period when she didn't have it, and we haven't paid anything for it because they need the data, I guess.
So maybe we take a quick tangent there. What are your thoughts of full self-driving?
I don't want it. I want to turn it off. I love autopilot. I absolutely adore autopilot. It is my favorite driver assistance system, period. I've driven most of them. I don't think I've done any Mercedes yet. Maybe, and I haven't experienced the Blue Cruise and the Super Cruise, but I don't count those because they don't really work everywhere. But my favorite driver assistance system is definitely autopilot. And full self-driving is too much for me. I like to drive. I like the way that I drive, because basically what you're doing is you're asking a driver with less experience to drive for you. And maybe I'm a little arrogant, or maybe I'm a little bit nuanced about how I drive and what my preferences are. Maybe I should, back it off a little bit on how much expectation I have of my driving performance while I'm behind the wheel. But I don't really like the way it drives yet.
So I'll share 2 quick stories about it. While our Model 3 was being repaired, right, we blew out the rear drive unit on one of our last trips back to Maryland from Cape Cod. While that was happening, they loaned us a Model 3 that, come to find out, had full self-driving on it. So when I found that out, I had to go try it. And I was pretty impressed. It had been a while since I had tried it, and it had come so far. I mean, it did what it's advertised to do, which was take me from our home, our house out there on the Cape, to my destination essentially with zero intervention, right? Stopping at stop signs, stopping at, well, in that part of the Cape, we don't have any stop lights, right? But I was able to try that part of it a little bit later. So I was very impressed with it. The second story I'll share with you just happened 2 days ago here in Maryland. I went to Costco, and as I'm coming out of Costco, loading our stuff in the car, I look and there's a Model 3 going by me, nobody in it. So this is in the parking lot of Costco, which, pretty full parking lot, people everywhere, cars everywhere.
Right.
And somebody from inside the warehouse summoned their vehicle out of whatever parking space it was in to go pick them up. So when I noticed that go by me, I actually watched it, and it pulled all the way up to the front of the warehouse. They got in, and I kind of shook my head. Would you even attempt that?
No, I saw one video where it drove like over a curb and caused some damage. And it was recently, it was this year. It was like, spring, summertime. And it was, I think it might've been right as the actual smart summon, whatever they're calling it, debuted. And it still like caused some damage. As soon as I saw that, I was like, never, absolutely never. Fun party trick if you're standing 10 feet away and there's no vehicles. Sure. Hey, you want to do something fun? You like, maybe you've got one of your kids is around, or, a nephew or something. Yeah. But no, I would absolutely never in a fully populated, functional parking arena. Absolutely not.
I could not believe that that was happening, but I think it's somewhat indicative of what's going on now, and it's somewhat exciting, right? All the Cybertrucks now also have full self-driving, and most of those on the road are Foundation series that got full self-driving with it. So this is going to be our new reality here moving forward. So I thought that was interesting to see.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, I recommend it because he came to me. I'll tell you how he ended up with a Tesla Model Y. He came to me and he said, I have $20,000. I'm looking for a wagon. He calls them a wagon because he's a truck guy. But he said, I'm looking for a wagon and I got 20 grand. What do I buy? I actually sent him an example of what you bought, the Volvo XC40 Recharge, because I really honestly believe that it is one of those vehicles like the Subaru Solterra and the BZ4X that at retail price is insane. But in the used market currently is an excellent deal, a heck of a deal. So I sent him that. Then he said, well, how do I purchase it online? I said, no, this is a traditional dealership. He's like, I kind of want to do the online thing. I don't really have time for all that. And so I'm like, well, they got 0% on the Tesla. I'm like, it's the last model year for this version of the Model Y. The new one's probably coming soon. I was like, but right now, if you are in the market, you can really get a great deal. I paid $57,000 in 2021 for a hardware 3, and he in 2024 was able to get it. I mean, it was definitely under 40,000. It was like 38 and change after all the discounts and inventory incentives. And then he also qualified for a low interest rate. I don't believe he went with 0 because I think he extended to either a 72-month, I think probably a 72-month. But it's just an insanely good deal, and it's really too hard to pass up if you're really in the market for an electric vehicle. And I agree with you as far as the experience being the first one. You want the Supercharger because I went to his house today. I helped him plug in his level 1 charger. I gave him the CCS to Tesla DC adapter. And at that point, he can charge anywhere he wants. And his native plug-in is absolutely effortless. I think it'll build confidence, and I think that that's really important for your first EV, but I could be wrong. I really do think though that he made a good choice. I mean, obviously, choosing a Tesla right now is different, let's say ethically from a political standpoint than it was 5-10 months ago, but the price sold the unit. So here we are.
Yeah. And I think that's really what's going to continue to drive Tesla sales, because that Elon Musk effect, especially, with a week to go, less than a week to go, from an election standpoint, it's having an impact on the business. The question is whether it's enough of an impact to really impact financial results and move the board to take action. I don't think we're anywhere near there just yet. But
Right.
that aside, there's also the idea of, and I'm wondering if this was even a consideration for your cousin, but the idea of having a vehicle that everybody else has, and maybe it's a little different in West Virginia where you guys are, but out here, I mean, I literally can go any direction from my house, and before I get out of my own neighborhood, we'll see 10 of them.
I live very close to the high school. I live in a very antique neighborhood for my town, and specifically my street. When I had a Tesla and my wife did, that made 4 on my street. But there might only be 10 in my entire neighborhood, and there might only be 50 in the whole town. And for him, the Tesla was an appeal. He said, no one at my work has one. I can't wait to show everybody what a good deal this was. So it is literally the opposite here. And we actually can dive right into another topic from that too, because you and I we always we have discussions where we go back and forth. And we were talking about long distance charging. In fact, we'll just open the topic up to charging for now. But your charging experience now, you have the Rivian R1T that you drive fairly regularly. You've got the Volvo. You got a Model X in Cape Cod, the Model S as well. How does your road tripping decision-making when it comes to charging, how does that change depending on what vehicle you have? And what are the major considerations for where and how often you stop?
Yeah, so typically when we do road trips, we're either, going all the way up to Cape Cod, which is 500 miles plus, right? So if I'm going to do that trip, the first choice is usually the Rivian R1T, right? That's the best EV we've ever owned. It's got the biggest battery. It's got the most range of all the vehicles that we have. And frankly, it's got the most optionality in terms of DC fast charging, road tripping, right? Because we've got access to the Rivian Adventure Network, which as of today is still exclusive access. We've got access to the Tesla Supercharger Network. We've got access to all of the different CCS networks. So I'm also on the I-95 New Jersey Turnpike East Coast corridor, where charging is plentiful, right? I don't have to worry about, am I going to find myself in a position where charging is going to be an issue, right? And really, we're 11 months away from my New Year's road trip that we had talked about with that same vehicle, where over that New Year's holiday weekend, we still had a lot of charging options, but everybody and their mama was on the road tripping that weekend, and the lines were insane, right? The only place that we didn't have a line was when we stopped at the Rivian Adventure Network site. So that's changed, though. Every time we've done that trip, and between January and today, we've probably done that trip a half a dozen times or more. And each time there's more charging options that I see when we do that trip. So it really is a non-issue here. But I'm firmly of the belief that you use the right tool for the right job, right? And for those long road trips, that's the Rivian R1T. If I'm going to Brooklyn, New York, right, to see my dad or family in New York, a lot of times I'll probably just take the Model S, right? Because the Model S, it's the 100D, and it has over 300 miles of range when I charge it to 100%. And so I can go straight from where I'm sitting right here to my dad's house in Brooklyn without needing to stop, right? And he's got a NEMA 1450 plug in his parking lot. So when I get there, I plug in. The next day, I'm good to go. I'm topped off, right? So that's typically what I would do. And last point with the Volvo, we were super intentional in knowing that replacing a 360-mile range Fister with that, the use case was for my wife going to school, going to work, running errands, daily driving here in Silver Spring. That's what that vehicle was purchased to do. So with 100% charge on that guy, we're looking at maybe 230 miles, right? So that's perfect for local driving. We'll see how it fares, as it gets colder and into the winter, but it's for daily driving. So that's how we approach it.
So in the event where you do decide, hey, I want to take the Rivian, every option is open now. Superchargers, Rivian, Adventure Network, anything CCS, ChargePoint, EVgo, EV Connect, Electrify America. What is your decision-making process then when you take that Rivian on a road trip for where you stop? Or are you following the navigation system?
So I am inherently frugal, and I'm being intentional in using that word. There's several other synonyms we could use, but I'm intentionally, frugal. And so when I'm doing that trip, I'm typically not relying on the navigation route planning, right? Because there's a ton of optionality with that, right? I can tell it specific charging networks that I want to use and so on. But I've done that trip so many times and I know the landscape. So I typically am very conscious of the fact that, unless I want to pay Tesla $13 a month, which I don't want to do, that I'm going to be paying a 30-40% premium in order to charge at, a nice, convenient Tesla supercharger. I also know that with the Rivian Adventure Network, it's going to be 36 cents a kilowatt hour, right? And that's going to be really hard to beat. And I've got exclusive access when I go there, so chances are I'm never waiting. I've never had to wait at one of those. That's going to change when they open it up, obviously. But yeah, that's how I approach it. Now, typically when my wife's doing that trip, she just wants convenience, right? And she's less so concerned because we don't do that trip. It's not like we're doing it every week. So she wants the convenience. And so she doesn't want to be having to plan out. She just wants to get in, put it into the GPS, let it know that, hey, I'm okay using the Tesla network. If I have to pay a little bit more, then I'll pay a little bit more or a lot more if that's the case. So she and I take different approaches, but the ubiquity of charging up and down this eastern corridor here gives us the flexibility to do that.
And we were talking about this. It's a yin and yang, because for me, when the Supercharger Network opened for my Honda, I was just celebrating. I don't care how much it costs. The answer is I can now go. And just to show you an example, let me pull it up here. This is Chenoweth Ford in Clarksburg. And if we check the price, 60 cents a kilowatt hour. They didn't even type it in correctly. It says kilowatt. And if you zoom out, it's a desert. None of the superchargers are going to be 60 cents. The highest I've ever seen is 55. So the Supercharger Network not only is more affordable than some of these options, now there are more affordable ones, especially ChargePoint. Some of those are more affordable, but typically those are in other states, like Western Maryland near West Virginia and not inside the state. So the fact that we got access at all is huge. And so the Supercharger Network, I know some people are saying, because there are a lot of reasons to do one or the other. Like, for example, I have free EVgo, so I'm obviously going to look for those first. I had some other commenters mention that they don't want to give Elon Musk any money, which, whatever floats your boat. But for me, having access to those superchargers, it made a big difference. Over time, the fact that those superchargers are available will eventually impact price in a positive way, because the more competition you have, like I said, frugal people like you, when there is a choice, price will start to become more important?
I totally agree. The competition is going to drive prices down. I'm frankly a little bit surprised that Rivian continues to charge 36 cents a kilowatt hour, right? They could raise that 10 cents and still be pretty competitive, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably what they will do when they open up the Rivian Adventure Network to other brands, right? They're going to charge other brands a premium, their customers anyway, other brands' customers a premium in order to charge at a Rivian site.
Staying on charging and staying with price, Volvo. You have a Volvo, obviously, and you can check out Brian's video. I'll put a link. But Volvo and Polestar now have access to the Supercharger Network. How much is a Volvo adapter? $230. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So first of all, it's obviously great to have yet another OEM, get a couple of OEMs, if we treat them separately, gain access to the Tesla Supercharger Network, right? So that was great news this week. The idea that these adapters rather, are $230 seems insane, right? Because we've got the Lectron, which folks have been using now by the thousands for probably 4 or 5 months now, that those have been on the market and people have been using them, with their Rivians and with their Fords initially. Those chargers, this is the Lectron Vortex we're looking at. What's the price?
$199.
$199, right? And you can use my referral code, which I'll put in the description of this video, to get 10% off, right? So the idea that they would charge $230, I reached out to my local Volvo dealership. They said it's not available yet, right? I can check back or they'll let me know. And it just doesn't seem to make sense. Why would somebody pay more? I think I know the answer, and I'm going to get to it here in a second. They're trying to scare people into paying more for the official Tesla to CCS1 adapter that you order from the dealership, by telling people that if they use a third-party adapter, it will or could potentially void their warranty.
Yeah, I don't like that very much either. The Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act prevents that legally, but a lot of people don't understand that. And then, for example, let's go to eBay. I've got, here's a Rivian, $439. There you go, $700 for an OEM. I don't think it makes any sense. Like you said, the Lectron, with your discount code, gets down to $189, and then the A to Z EV is already $189. You and I have both tested these adapters. I agree with both of them. I recommend you, if you want the Lectron, to use Brian's link. And also, I want to scoot right through that too, because if you go to Ford's website, Tom Malogny released a new video that's saying Ford is shipping Lectron adapters. The Ford website is now also $200, and they display the Lectron adapter. There it is, $200 on the Ford website. It's really weird because at first the Rivians and the Fords said, "Hey, we're not even trying to profit. We want you to have access to the Supercharger Network." And now they're, I know that $30 is just a pure profit. And you're taken away from the experience. I mean, like how important was it for you to get an adapter once that became available?
Yeah, once it became available, it was definitely something I was very much interested in. And I was not going to pay for an adapter. Again, remember, I'm frugal. And Rivian, to their credit, along with Ford, said that they would provide existing EV owners with the official adapter. And this is the one, right? I just got this a week ago on Tuesday. And this is manufactured by Tesla. It's essentially the same thing that they have within the Magic Dock sites with the built-in adapter. And I literally just got it. Rivian sent it to me, no cost, right? So it was great to have it. Full disclosure, before I even got that, I got a message from Lectron, and they said, "Hey, we'll send you one of these if you test it and just, do a video about your experience with it. They didn't tell me what to say or what I couldn't say or any of that. There were no strings along those lines. They just said, Harry, if you'll do this on your channel, you can keep it and, just share what your experience has been. And I have been using their AC charger in my garage here. Still am.
I have one too. They're great.
Yeah. So this works really well. The thing I really like about this is I get out the car, plug it in to my vehicle, and now my vehicle has become a Tesla inlet, right? So now I just take the Tesla One and plug it in. So that works pretty well for me. But the thing that I find ironic about the OEMs telling people that they should only use this official adapter that is Tesla produced is it's only been out for a few months and it's been recalled, at least the ones that Ford was sending to their customers, right? And I'm speculating, we can both speculate, but we think that's part of the reason now that Ford is offering the Lectron adapter on their website. Now, Tom Malogny also mentioned that he found out that Ford worked with Lectron to build, I guess, version 3 of this thing, right? Because this is version 2 of it, because Ford had some concerns with the way that this one operated. So they made some additional tweaks to the one that's now available for purchase on the Ford website. So
how do you feel about the robustness, just in comparison? Do you think the Lectron is the better adapter?
Between these two that I've got here?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just like the way that this one works. It feels more sturdy. This one, if you play around with it, smack it around a little bit, it doesn't feel as rock solid as the Lectron does.
I feel the same about the A to Z EV. I did a test also between the A to Z EV and the Lectron adapter, and the A to Z EV is easier to use. The single button definitely, but I feel more confident using the Lectron. In fact, when I took a recent road trip, and that video will be up soon, in my Honda with my wife for her birthday, I did use one supercharger and I chose the Lectron for that. So I mean, that kind of tells the whole story about which one I feel is more robust. So what do you recommend somebody does? If I've got a Volvo and I'm just now checking my email, or this video is the first news I've gotten that, hey, Volvo has access now, what do you recommend they do? Are you going to order one from Volvo? Do you get the Lectron? What are your thoughts there?
So I would not order one from Volvo. As you just showed, it's, 25% more expensive to buy. And it's not really buying, you're ordering it, and it'll be delivered at some point in the not too distant future, because they don't
That's another point, right?
Right. They don't have them in stock. You can order the Lectron, you can order the A to Z, and you can have those in your possession within a few days, right? So that's point one. Point two, as it relates to Volvo, I'll only speak for Volvo because I haven't had a chance to test Polestar yet, but I've been to 2 different superchargers with our Volvo. And the thing that people need to know is that while we have immediate access to the Tesla superchargers, as long as you have, either the Lectron, the A to Z, or in my case, I also have this official Tesla manufactured one, our vehicles haven't been updated yet. The Volvo Cars app haven't been updated yet. And I believe the same is true for Polestar, right? So while it'll work, it requires us to use the Tesla app in order to find where the superchargers are, because when I put it into the Volvo, it fires off alerts letting me know, hey, your vehicle isn't compatible with the charging location Tesla supercharger you just put in here, right? So November 18th is the date within the email from Volvo where they said on or about that date, we're going to get an over-the-air update to the vehicle's infotainment, navigation, route planning software, as well as an update to the Volvo Cars app. And once that happens, you can use the route planning that will include Tesla, but you can also use the Volvo Cars app to be able to pay for charging versus using the Tesla app for everything right now. It won't be until some point next year before we start to see EVs show up on dealer lots with native NACS support, right, in terms of the charging inlet.
Yeah. Now, speaking of changes and access to things, Tesla took away some features for radio, right? And this affected you. Can we get into that?
Yeah, I mean, ever since, and by ever since, I mean, the first day that we took delivery of our first Tesla was Valentine's Day, 2013. And I'll never forget when I was driving home, right? Slacker radio is what it was. And with Slacker radio, I could basically tell the car to play anything that popped into my head. And I remember as we were pulling out of the Tesla showroom here in Rockville, I said, play Another One Bites the Dust, right? And that was the song I chose to go with in that first Model S. And that's how I've always listened to music in our Teslas, and still to this day. I get in and I use, I just push that button on the left side of the steering wheel and I tell it, hey, play whatever's in my head. At some point recently, Slacker Radio was bought out by something called Live, and I can't remember what the name is now.
It's Live One. Yeah.
Live One, that's it. Thank you. And about a month ago, we got an email from Tesla letting us know that the Live One service would be requiring a premium subscription that we would have to pay for starting in about a month from now, right? Early
December 1st. Yep.
Yeah. So
what are you going to do?
I don't know.
Are you a Spotify guy, Apple Music? What do you think?
So here's the thing, right? I don't have Slacker Radio or Live One in the Rivian. I don't have Slacker Radio or Live One in the Volvo, right? That's only something that I use when I get into a Tesla vehicle. So ever since last year when we got the Rivian, and earlier this year with the Volvo, I've been using Spotify. And the thing I really like is that once I'm logged into my Spotify account, right? If I'm listening to Another One Bites the Dust and I get out of the R1T, and then I get back into the Volvo, I literally in Spotify can pick up and continue listening to the same track, right? So it travels with me from one vehicle to the next, and I can do the same in Tesla because Tesla's added Spotify as well. So that'll be where I go from now on is to Spotify and just have my music travel with me in that way.
Okay. I've been a Spotify guy for years. They have the best interface, both on the phone, actually all the interfaces, on the phone, on CarPlay, and then the independent apps are all really well optimized, and even on the computer. So I really do think that it's the best move. So good luck with your Spotify, and I'm sorry you lost Live One. I used it one time when I borrowed my buddy's Model Y to test drive it, and it was really nice, and it's kind of sad that they're making it go away. Speaking of changes in the industry, how are you feeling? Jim Farley was on the Everything Electric show, and he talked about Chinese cars. The one big grab of the quote was this Xiaomi SU7 was, which just recently set a Nürburgring record, I think, with the prototype. But the Xiaomi SU7 was his favorite thing, and he was going to have trouble giving it back. How much of a threat is China, and how do we overcome it as an American automotive industry? I can show you some numbers really quick, too. Let's see. As of the first half of 2024, Chinese automakers produced 13 million units. Toyota produced 11 million, which is the largest individual automaker as far as volume. So China as a country is now bigger than the biggest automaker. Is that a threat? And what do we do?
So yes, it's absolutely a threat. And I'm going to give Jim Farley kudos, and I'm also going to give him a kick in the pants, right? Kudos to him for not just, reading analyst reports, right? He actually was boots on the ground in China, right? Looking at the landscape there so he can understand, obviously, what his company has to compete with in that largest automotive market in the world. And to also, get a sense of what's coming out of China into Europe and the US eventually, right? And other markets where they're going to have to compete with them. So kudos to him for being boots on the ground, not having the arrogance of saying we're going to be better, but importing one of those Xiaomi SU7s into the US and having, I think he said he'd been driving it for almost 6 months and is absolutely loving it, does not want to give it up. Right. So he gave them all the props in the world. And part of what's amazing to me is that that Xiaomi is the equivalent of Apple in China, right? This is not an automaker, right? Their history, their legacy, their core business, if you will, is electronics. It's not vehicles. So this is their first. I mean, think of it as the car project that Apple was working on. I forgot what the code name was for that, right? Or the Sony car that I guess we'll be seeing here in another year and change. So everything that I've seen and heard, and Jim was very, very complimentary of that vehicle. And then, less than a month later, they're testing a prototype of an even higher end vehicle that they'll be offering as early as next year. Six-figure vehicle. I think they said the price on that is about $120K, and it's rivaling a $2 million plus Rimac Nevera on the Nürburgring. So it's amazing what the Chinese are doing. And none of that talks about what I would imagine is really amazing technology and integration within the vehicle to your mobile device, right? Because that's their core competency. I would imagine there's super infotainment and integration there too. So the Chinese threat, in my opinion, is really real. I think what we're doing from a tariff perspective on Chinese automotive makers coming into the US, it's really just a temporary stopgap. That's going to change, right? So it's buying time for US OEMs to get our, stuff together.
38% of all vehicles produced were new energy vehicles. So I don't know if that's plug-in hybrids included, but that's a big number. It's way bigger than any number we could ever quote. Are we going to do that? Are we going to move? Or are these automakers going to stay in the past and just try to push gasoline until there's no more company left?
Yeah, we're going to move. We're not going to move as quickly as personally I think we should. And frankly, as I think we all know we need to. But the question's been answered. It's been asked and answered multiple times. So there's no more gray area. Our future in automotive is battery electric. Full stop, right? If you still have questions about that, you've got your head in the sand, right? That is not up for debate any longer. And so it's really just a question of how quickly will these automakers make that transition. I would argue, and this is where I want to kick Jim Farley in the butt, right? Because Ford, as much as they talk and market a really good message around making this transition, they just haven't delivered, right? And in fact, they've said that we're going to slow it down and we're going to take a couple of steps back so we can take a bigger leap forward. That's disappointing, but against the backdrop of them having lost somewhere between $3 and $5 billion in their EV business, with a month left to go in this year, I can understand why they're doing it. But I think the longer you take to get there, the more you put yourself as a company at risk, because the Chinese and other competitors are coming.
There's my argument. To consider investment in research and development a loss is idiotic. If I'm a marketing guy, I'm saying, hey, this year we invested, $5 billion in electric technology. But instead, because they have to keep selling the F-150 gas version, they're saying that it was a loss. And in my opinion, that was a marketing decision. That was a conscious decision for them to say that our electric vehicle division lost a bunch of money. They didn't have to do that. They could have said, we spent money getting better at EVs. If you can't even make the marketing look right, and Jim Farley admitted it himself, he said, the number one consideration when people buy a vehicle is cost, and then turns right around 10 sentences later and says, we're going to build upper market EVs. So you've just said that cost is the thing, and then chose not to offer a low-cost option. You got to lose money. I mean, think about the Chevy Bolt. Did GM ever make $1 on that vehicle? I don't think they ever made $1 on that vehicle. But there's a whole lot of people that will have GM EV brand loyalty going forward because of that vehicle, regardless of who built it. I mean, GM's been slapping, Chevy badges on Korean vehicles since I can remember. But regardless of who built it, it says Chevy on it, and people are going to want another one. You made the great point. Jim Farley deserves credit for going to the market and finding out what the reality is. He deserves a kick in the pants for not being able to move it forward in his agenda.
Shareholder value.
I know.
Hopefully it won't backfire on them, but it's also disappointing that the Ford Explorer EV is only in Europe, right? It's not even
No.
coming to the US.
What a perfect point. Have you seen the Explorer advertisements for the US this year? It just shows an Explorer sitting on top of a mountain and the family getting out to this beautiful, this beautiful view of the canyons below. And
This is not the EV though.
no, just the Ford Explorer.
Yep.
What they say is Ford Explorer, it's all in the name. This is such a recognized brand that they don't even have to say anything about it. And you won't build it in the US. I agree with you 100% there. And I think the Ford Explorer they are building is like a joke because it's not even a Ford. It's a Volkswagen.
Exactly. It's a Volkswagen.
Wait, what?
Yeah, to put a final point on, your comment around cost, right? What's been the highest selling EV over the course of the last several months, right? It's been the Equinox, right? And here's a vehicle that allows us to bring the price down closer to 40 into the 30s with the tax credit, right? So I think if GM can continue to show really robust sales around Equinox, which by all accounts, I haven't had a chance to drive one yet. I've sat in one. I had a chance to talk to an owner and spend some time with him and it. By all accounts, it's a great EV. If we can get more competition in that space and really continue to drive the price down, I think it's speaking to the fact that people aren't necessarily against EVs. They're against spending 50, 60, 70 plus for an EV when a gasoline equivalent is 10 to 20 grand less.
Well, and honestly, that's not even true anymore either, because if you go to, let's say, a Stellantis lot, the Grand Cherokee is $50,000. What is it? The Hornet? Is that the Dodge crossover?
Yeah.
It's $40,000. You can get an Equinox EV, a well-equipped Equinox EV for less. So it's not even a price parity thing anymore. With the tax credit, there's plenty of price parity to be had, and there's actually a decent amount of selection. So at that point, you have to stop saying loss and you have to start saying investment. And
100% agree.
Shareholder value, sometimes you got to have a bad quarter just for the sake of having a bad quarter. You had a little stranded situation yourself in your Model 3. And I know you've talked about this in great length on your channel, and we've mentioned it before. But what I would like to do is ask you, what has this done to your opinion of Tesla? Like, how did you feel after this entire experience with your Model 3 motor breaking down? And just to summarize really quickly, the motor went, it was replaced, it was under warranty. But if you want to share some of the details and then maybe how you feel about it afterwards, I'd definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, my relationship with Tesla is complicated, man. I was an early adopter, as I talked about on this podcast. I mean, we've had 4 or 5 of them. We still have 3 of them, Tesla Solar and Powerwalls on this house. And I'm a shareholder, right? I still have shares of Tesla that I bought when it was a 2-digit number to buy a share. And I've essentially never sold any of that stuff. So with that being said, given what I've seen in terms of the proliferation of their vehicles, some of the quality challenges, which have gotten better, especially the challenges around service. I'm old school. Sometimes I just want to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I got a problem. Can you help me? Right? You cannot do that with Tesla. And that is intentional. It's a cost savings. It's something that they do not want to have to do, right? All of the Teslas that I have currently, the newest one is a 2018. We've got 2 2018s, right? The S and the Model 3, and then the X is a 2016. They all have sonar sensors on them. Right now, everything is done via vision. And I'm of the belief that level 3 and level 4 is a race to 9s, right? Behind the decimal. And in order to get all the way to the number of 9s you need in order to do level 3, level 4, ultimately level 5, I don't think you're going to be able to achieve it with just vision. That's just me, right? There's too many environmentals that will interrupt that. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. The service experience was not a great one. And then I can juxtapose that against what my experience is like dealing with Rivian. And I'll share a really quick story. About 2 weeks ago, I get a call from Rivian service. They left me a message saying, hey, we've noticed that your 12-volt battery is going to need to be replaced soon. And so we're proactively reaching out to you to see if we can schedule a service appointment to do that before it actually goes. Unreal. right? How many times have you had to replace a 12-volt battery on your Tesla? I mean, I've had to do it probably 3-4 times across the vehicles that we've had. And not once did that happen prior to it failing on the vehicle. So we're talking here Sunday night at 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. I literally can pick up the phone right now and call Rivian service and get a person on the line.
When the R2 launches and they start doing high volume, will that continue?
I don't know, right? They have benefit of being, sometimes the second mouse gets the cheese. So they've seen Tesla go out in front and lead and be a pioneer. And so now they can sort of follow along and make a determination in terms of how they want to approach this. Hopefully they continue to have a high level of service, but as they get more and more vehicles out there, that's going to change.
You mentioned the nines, and I don't mean to interrupt, but you mentioned the nines and level 5, that robo-taxi event. They had the robo van, right? And like every company,
is the Robovan.
Oh yeah, well, I knew it was yeah, Robovan. And so I laughed just as hard as you did when he said that. In fact, I think until somebody else.
That is the most pretentious. Don't even get me started.
Yeah. So anyway, in my video, I mentioned that there were issues with it, especially with financial things when it comes to buses, because all buses are subsidized. They're there to move people around that don't have other options, right? That's what buses are for. Buses are to make cities navigable for people that live in cities. And the comment was, is there a problem with eliminating subsidized buses and replacing them with cheaper to operate robo-vans, which do not require subsidies? Regardless of whether we make it to level 5, my point is, with some of this stuff, you're going to need the subsidies. Tesla will never make money on a Robovan.
My primary take is they need to stop having this guy be the lead voice when it comes to revealing new technology, new products, and providing any sort of detail, right? Because he doesn't do it. What he does do, and I'll give him credit for this, is paint a vision for the future, right? What we saw in that event was his vision of the future, right? And I think he is still a visionary, and I think it's important to have that. Other than that, I don't even want to hear from him, right? So I think you have to take a lot of the things that we hear from him and just sort of set it aside and move on with your day.
So for me, the most exciting part of that reveal was inductive charging, wireless charging. That was, to me, the most important thing. And he's literally skipped the slides on it, said it in a sentence, and then that was it. And people are telling me in the comments of my reaction to it, hey, you need to just not worry about it. Inductive charging has been proven already. Well, where's that example? Where's the real world inductive charging that I can go test?
Why do you say it's exciting? What was so exciting about that aspect of the reveal?
Because it always takes me back to New York City. I think New York City is probably my favorite big city to visit. It's like electrical infrastructure in general. You go to Britain, there's no power lines. You look up in the air, there's nothing because all that stuff's underground. So it gives you the opportunity to say, 1 out of every 3 spaces on every street has a wireless charge. My car says, hey, I'm ready to wirelessly charge. Do you want to use your in-car app to charge the car? In my opinion, wireless charging solves charging. If parking places in downtown areas of towns just had wireless charging, I feel like a lot of charging situations would be solved. The same thing with apartment buildings and all of that. It's really hard for a vandal to, what is he going to do? Rent a jackhammer to mess with your inductive, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like inductive charging solves a lot of the infrastructure issues. And there's just no demonstration of that at all. But if you have another take, I'm very excited to hear, because like I said, that was my take, is that you really messed up. Inductive charging, that's a product you can sell tomorrow.
Yeah, so we know that Tesla made an acquisition not that long ago that focuses on wireless charging, right? So this is something that they're working on that isn't necessarily at the forefront of what we see from them today. I also happen to know that DARPA, which is a federal entity that is focused on all sorts of research and development, right? They're doing a ton of work and have had some major significant breakthroughs around wireless inductive charging, to your point. I mean, just think about our phones, my Apple Watch, right? These are all things that I only charge inductively today.
Me too.
Right? That wasn't the case, a year, certainly not 2-3 years ago. So I see where you're going with this in terms of bringing that technology from our phones and Apple Watches to our vehicles, right? So it's exciting, but again, part of the reason we did not get much detail about that, or frankly anything else in that reveal, is they had the wrong guy at the wheel.
There are a team of engineers behind every one of those products that can be laser focused and specific. And all you have to do is take their presentation and just cross off the secrets, redact all the secrets, and then tell us that. And then let them tell us that. They did that in the past. Tesla did have sections of presentations where, individual engineers were coming out and talking. And I guess the share price wasn't doing what it was supposed to do like the day after. It's just so short-sighted. If you want your actual tech-forward early adopter focused people to go after this stuff, you need to tell them some detail. So I think both of us are on the same page. Just that reveal was very disappointing. We had an unveil ourselves where your brother recently loaned us the Cybertruck, and we took an opportunity to test drive them all together, the new R1 series, both the S and the T. I have a part 1 on my channel. You have a part 2 on your channel. I could argue part 2 is a little more detailed. You went into some really great detail about the specifications, obviously with your experience. Looking back on that now, how did you feel about the Cybertruck drive and the Cybertruck overall as a vehicle? I know one of your recent videos also said you're not going to go ahead and order one. And that was probably 4 months ago. Do you still feel the same way?
Yeah. So first of all, that day was so much fun. I had a lot of other things going on in my life and work at the time, and I really needed the escape, right, of hanging out with you, hanging out with my brother, driving EVs. So that was a ton of fun, and I can't wait till we get to do it again. Yeah, I went ahead and I canceled my Cybertruck order. I ordered it the night after it was revealed. That night, both my wife and I were super disappointed, right? Our brains just couldn't wrap our heads around the, triangular block that we saw. And when I woke up the next day and, reflected on the specs and the pricing and all that stuff, I was like, yeah, we got to do it. So I put in the order. But, last year we got the Rivian, and again, best EV I've ever owned. It's great towing our camper, and there's just too much baggage is the way I would put it, associated with Cybertruck. It doesn't deliver on the specs that, again, with towing being a primary use case for us, that's a concern. The additional 20 grand premium, at least prior to them now offering it at $79,900, right? Before that, it was $100,000, right? So I recommended to my brother that he wait. I said, just wait a few months, wait until the end of this year. You're going to be able to get the same truck, 20 grand less. But he wanted to be an early adopter with it. He's super happy. He has no intentions of selling the truck. And so that 20K depreciation isn't going to hurt him, right? Because he's not looking to sell it. So
yeah, at the end of the day, the deal you get is a good deal if you believe it is. Right? That's really what it comes down to.
If you're happy with it, right, it's not until, you need to monetize it or something along those lines where it can be a challenge. If that's not what you're planning to do, you're fine. Go ahead and enjoy it. Don't worry about depreciation. Just move on. So I love that the function informed what the form of that vehicle looks like. I love the fact that Tesla, again, was pioneering in terms of bringing 48-volt architecture, bringing steer-by-wire, right? Those are two technologies that you don't even really see it when you see that triangular block moving down the road, right? The secret sauce, if you will, is under that shell, right? So I can truly appreciate that. I can appreciate the technology that's in there. I can appreciate the quality and the feel of the seats, especially like we talked about in our videos, right? You sit in those seats and they, hug you. Whereas with the Rivian, the seats look better, the materials are different, but you're sitting on it versus in it. So I can appreciate a lot about the Cybertruck, but given the complexity of Musk, of everybody and their mama having it, right? I'm an early adopter, but I also want to have some uniqueness. I want to have some specialness in the things that I bring into my life.
Let's stay right there, because on the last podcast we left off with a secret. And if you know what you're talking about in EVs, it wasn't as much of a secret as we maybe made it out to be. But are you still considering this as one of the options? The Hummer EV. If you were to get today unlimited budget, I know for a couple of frugal guys that's probably hard to think about, but would this be the one?
Yeah, if I was going to go buy an EV tomorrow, money is relatively no object. It would probably be, and the reason I said that is because I love the ability to remove the top, right? As we've talked about ad nauseum, I spend a lot of time on Cape Cod, especially in the summer, and to be able to, not the truck, I'd probably move towards the SUV, just because we already have a truck with our Rivian. So the Hummer EV SUV is the one that I would lean towards. The only thing that's kind of stuck in my craw about this is I went to an EV event about a month ago here locally, and that white pickup truck was there, and I got a chance to talk to the owner, and he took delivery in November of last year. So it was just under a year ago, a month ago, when I was talking to him. Guess how many over-the-air updates he had?
I'd have to go 0.
0 is ding, 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 right? But he did have one, and he had to take it into the dealership for that update, right? So that's the one thing for me that's concerning, right? Is, does GM have the competence? Do they have the wherewithal to make this vehicle better over time, as I've gotten used to living in the world of Tesla and Rivian, who are arguably the two best at it, right? And then even with our Volvo, I've had that car since May, and we've had 2 over-the-air updates, 2 or 3, right? And we're expecting one here on or around November 18th.
Well, let's stay right there too, because I do have a Prologue, which is essentially an Ultium vehicle. I haven't had any updates, but I do have in my maps the NACS adapter Tesla Supercharger version 3 as an option for my settings for what infrastructure to use on route planning. And I think that's a Google thing. So I figure that's why it's there. But also staying on the Ultium platform, we also talked about this vehicle here, the Cadillac Lyriq. If you were considering something in that price range, is this the one? And would those updates play a role?
Yeah, for me, over-the-air software updates are probably a top 3 criteria, right, in terms of what I look for in an EV. So I would have the exact same concern with this vehicle. I really like the Cadillac Lyriq. I actually saw one last night coming home from Costco, and I actually rolled my window down and spoke to the owner, and she absolutely loved it, right? So, and it's become one of GM's best-selling vehicles, not just EVs, right? So really like what they're doing with this, but I'm more the exception, I think, than the rule in terms of having the expectation, if not requirement, that the vehicle be updated over the air on a regular basis, right? Not everybody's looking for that. Matter of fact, I'm about to help a friend of mine who wants an EV truck, right? And when I mentioned over-the-air updates, he's like, "Man, listen, I'm not really interested in that. That's not really a concern of mine." So I know that I'm the exception, right? Not everybody's going to care about whether or not it's going to be updated and made better over time.
Well, other than features, the fact that it does get better over time, the fact that technology runs 1,000 miles an hour, it's also a big deal on resale value. I sold my Model Y 2021 with just under 30,000 miles for $30,000 to Carvana, and you can get a brand new one for, $38,000. That's not a lot of gap. And I mean, that's a 3-year difference in the vehicle. And everybody says you lose 10% off the lot. Well, if that's true, then, the difference between resale value from a 21 to a brand new 24 is so small. And I believe that a lot of the reason that resale value is so high for Teslas is those over-the-air updates. So not only do you suffer a little bit as a consumer not having those updates, but inevitably you're going to suffer on the back end when you go to sell, at least in my opinion.
So let me ask you this question, because I'm of the mindset right now where, and you know this, right? I've had 8 EVs since 2013. Every time we bought a new one, we got 7,500 from the federal government, and whether it's $3,000 in Maryland or 2,500 in Massachusetts, there was also a state incentive. So it was like 10 grand or more, right, that you were getting in the form of incentives to do it. I'm of the mindset now where if I'm not going to be getting those incentives, the used EV marketplace is a toy store. There's so many great options at great prices. I mean, even with our Volvo earlier this year, I was essentially able to get that thing for half off with less than 5,000 miles 1 year later, right? So I'm wondering, did you guys look at any used options?
Every used option. Number one, he needs one now, because if he said, hey, I'm really considering an EV, and he was considering the Tesla, I would have said, wait till December 15th, because as long as that Model Y Juniper is not released, those demand levers are going to continue to be pulled, right?
Right.
More incentives, more things off. They might come up with another more affordable version, whatever. But yes, I gave him the best deals outside of Tesla are the Aria, which is 25. You can get Arias under 10,000 miles for 25 all day, all day long. Now, they're not equipped. The problem with the Aria is trim levels. There's 7 trims, which is
insane.
The BZ4X and Solterra are probably the next. I just test drove one. I test drove one back in the summer, early summer, but I just released a video because I'm actively looking for one. The big advantage there, it's a horrible charging car. It has no range, but you already know that, for the right use case, that doesn't matter. What it does have is 8.3 inches of ground clearance on the all-wheel drive models. The Toyota's all-wheel drive models, all the Subarus are all-wheel drive, but those are also 25. I just got an out-the-door price. That's taxes, title, registration, fees for 8,000 miles on a BZ4X all-wheel drive, limited, top tier, 29,000. That's out the door. So that's a good deal. If you need, because basically what the BZ4X and Solterra are an electric RAV4. I've been in them. I've looked at them. They're the same size, the same footprint, the same ground clearance. It's just an electric RAV4. And then basically any of their competition, the ID4, the Blazer EV is that window is kind of closed because the new ones were 35 and then there's no used ones right now. So, but yeah, I mean, there are, for under 30,000, that's out the door. There are so many examples. The issue there becomes the reason why you buy the Tesla is interest rates. Tesla 0% for 60, 1.99 for 72. You can get 2.99% for 84 months. And a standard interest rate at 84 months is like 10. It's like $5,000 difference on the back end. So that's my thoughts on the used market.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about leasing, right? And leasing for EVs are through the roof so far this year, right? I think the increase is like 80 or 90% increase in number of people leasing them.
It is because the $7,500 credit loophole can be surpassed, or it is a loophole. You can still get the $7,500 with a lease. And then honestly, the other set, like the next set of vehicles, if you're not worried about price as much as you are like price for the money, the best value on the market outside of Tesla is the EGMP platform, EV6, Ioniq 5. Those are awesome deals, but they're a little more. They go for like 32 out the door. The prices are 27, 28, and the mileage is a little higher because what have people done? They've road tripped them because they're just magnificent road trip vehicles. They hold at 230 kilowatts forever.
Besides the interest rates, the other reason that people are leasing is the fact that we're seeing so much depreciation.
I don't believe that. I disagree with that 1,000%, because if you're looking at MSRP, there can be some conclusions drawn, but nobody paid MSRP. All the cars that have depreciated all this amount were all $7,500 tax credits, all of them, because there was no income rule. If you bought an EV before summer of 22, you got $7,500 off, unless you bought a Tesla, which is another reason the Tesla resale values are so high, is because they didn't have the tax credit. But those numbers, you take $7,500 and add it back in to every one of those resale values, and those people did not lose the amount of money that they may claim to have lost. It's just a reality.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's a huge part of why I can't see ever, at least no time soon, moving away from our Rivian, right? We got it before the price increase, and we were able to get the transition rule for the full credit. So that's, it's a deal.
I don't want to say this out loud because I'm actively looking in this market, but if you want to buy a used EV and you do happen to qualify for the tax credit, which it's a little bit harder, the income limit for the used EV credit is pretty low. It's like 150, I think, is the income. So you got to be pretty low as far as, household income to qualify for the used credit. But if you do not buy anything right now, because January 1st, 2025, all the 23s become eligible for the tax credit. All the single owner in fact, all the 23s. Because that's the rule, right? All these BZ4Xs and Solteras, which is the perfect example, they're like 26,000, 27.5. I called a dealership and I said, if you'll give me the tax credit, and I take a bath on my trade, which is basically take that 1,600 over 25 grand and just take it off my trade. I was like, will you give me the tax credit? They said yes, and I thought, okay, great. But then they looked it up, and this is something I had forgotten. They said, well, it has to be 2 model years old. And so January 1st, 2025 is the best time to buy because a whole lot of cars came out in 23. A whole lot of cars. 22 is not a lot going on. EVs were 70 grand. Like if you look back at 2022, it's like a different world, right? And so, none of this depreciation had happened yet. The interest rate thing had really kicked in for everybody because people weren't actively, they were seeing it, but they weren't actively purchasing things with those high rates. And now it's all kicked in. So if you want to buy a used EV and you might qualify for the credit, I definitely encourage you to wait till January 1st, 2025. And so that's the used market. Another vehicle we can definitely look at that's been launched. I know we talked about the Scout at the top, but at the bottom, let's talk about the Lucid Gravity. What are your thoughts?
I think they made a strategic error launching the company with the Air versus the Gravity, right? Especially with a U.S. launch. Sedans aren't the thing here, right? Especially if you're going to look to go after the likes of, Mercedes in that premium sedan market. If they had come out with the Gravity initially with a 7-seat crossover SUV with those specs, north of 400 miles of range, with a front gating seat in the front, enough room to carry bikes and all sorts of stuff in there, with the way that thing looks, I think their story and situation might be totally different, right? And also in that 6 or 7 seat SUV marketplace, there's not nearly as much competition, right? They would have been going up against R1S, Kia EV9, and Model X. That's it. They would have done extremely well with the Gravity, as I think it will do now, right? But
I totally agree. I mean, the one of the worst selling cars currently on the market is the Hyundai Ioniq 6. And the Ioniq 5 is nowhere to be seen in that realm. And that's because it's not a sedan. People don't want to buy sedans. It's not a popular thing. Companies aren't pushing them. Ford completely abandoned the sedan. They still sell one car. But I don't think the sedan was the right move. I think that long range and efficiency kind of grabbed them, but I would have been okay with a 350 mile or 300 mile Lucid Gravity to launch the company. I think that's a really solid insight, and I couldn't agree more. Yeah. What do you think about
question earlier about, money, no object? What would I buy? If I asked my wife that question, this is what she would probably answer with, because she loves the interior of this. I think it's shown with like a saddle brown leather interior in some cases. This is an awesome EV, right? If we were at a different stage of life where we still had kids in the house, no question that this would be that option, right? Especially after, we spent time in the R1S here recently, and we know, it probably could ride and feel a little bit better. I'm assuming this probably feels like you're riding on a cloud.
Well, the funny thing when you say cloud is that the Lucid Air has a static suspension and the Lucid Gravity has an air suspension optional. So maybe the naming wasn't quite there either. But Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think the Lucid Gravity, if it makes it to market and there aren't any other issues, then yeah, we're definitely looking at a winner there. I don't think the pricing really matters, especially the first year. They're all going to be gone. People are going to gobble them up, just like the ID Buzz, which I guess is now part of the Gravity's competition, if you want to consider it that. At least it does have the third row. Yeah, I definitely am a fan of the Lucid Gravity. Another high-priced vehicle, or at least high-priced vehicle brand, McLaren, was recently acquired. Have you seen this? This is kind of off the docket.
Yeah, I don't know that I've seen that.
Yeah, McLaren was acquired by the company CYVN, and they own almost all of NIO. Are you familiar with the Chinese company NIO?
Yeah, they look for their battery swapping. Yeah.
So McLarens are going to be all electric really soon. What are your, just if this is the first you're hearing, I just heard of it today, first time as well. What's your thoughts off the cuff there?
I know that NIO is perceived as one of the premium EV brands in China, right? And so unless they're going to create a McLaren offering that's going to be for the masses, I don't know that I care a whole lot.
Okay. I disagree here. The poster realm. What is the future, the youth of the world? What are they going to aspire to? And if they're aspiring to something electric, I believe that can change the thoughts of people. I think that there's been so much just gasoline, hypercar, everything for so many years. And I feel like the biggest hurdle for EV adoption is that nothing is fun. Like you said, the Gravity is great, and that's what, regular buyers are after, but we need more GR86 and BRZ type of vehicles in the electric range and electric realm. Obviously, Tesla's not going to build them. Ford's not going to build them. I don't know who's going to build a fun EV. We need something fun. Like the Rimac is cool because it's the fastest, whatever, but I don't think it's really that intriguing looks wise. But I think McLarens are like, McLaren is, to me, right beside Pagani as far as looks. It's just super exotic looking. So I do think that as far as the market, maybe no effect, but I do think for future, like for the aspiring generations, the youth of the world, I think it's good to have another electric brand in that realm. But that's basically my whole thought there. Any other thoughts to add before we get? I know we've gone long.
The Volkswagen ID Buzz, right? Because that's the only minivan on the market that is fully electric. What are your thoughts on that thing?
It's 5 years too late. If it was only going to, if 5 years ago, what would 5 years ago have been? 2020 model year? That would have been a big deal. A really big deal. No price would have shocked anyone. They could have sold them for $100,000, $120,000. Because they were 3-row, because they were electric, and that 225 miles of range, it doesn't matter. They would have just said, well, you know what? I'll figure out a way to road trip it. It's a microbus. I think now they're all going to sell. There won't be any videos of them. Nobody will have an ID Buzz YouTube channel because those two worlds don't converge. The people that'll be buying these are going to be paying $10,000 markups at a $75,000 launch price to start with. I just don't see a whole lot of people saying, hey, I'm going to take my $90,000 car and make a YouTube channel about it. But because that's the reality, right? They're going to be super expensive. But that's my take on the ID Buzz. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's like you said, they're going to sell every single one that they build and put on dealer lots. And like you said, they'll probably sell for a premium. But I think, past the initial pent up demand, there's an opportunity there. But that opportunity won't be fully realized, I think, at $70,000 for 220 miles of range. But if they can get that thing down 50, 60K and get the range closer, somewhere between 250 and 300, then it becomes more of a mass appeal type of vehicle because it looks spectacular, right? And it's got a ton of utility and convenience with 3 rows of seating. And I can sit all the way back in the 3rd row, at 6'6", right? It's got that much room. So it just depends on, whether or not they can get it to that point, build it here in the US so that it qualifies for any sort of incentives. And I think it becomes a really good option because people love, want, and need minivans, right? Not everybody wants to have a 3-row SUV, right? There are folks who would prefer a van. And this is the ultimate when it comes to that.
People want it, and those people that can afford it, like that, that Venn diagram, I want it, I can afford it. They're going to get them. They're going to pay a stupid amount of money. Want it and can't afford it is a massive, it's like 99.9%. I want one, but I can't afford it. So big miss there. I don't think Volkswagen will ever drive it down. I just don't see it. I don't see them doing it. I don't think Volkswagen wants any electric anything ever. The way they've done this, the Porsche Taycan is a technological marvel, and it's a road tripping just gem. But that's it. The e-tron GT is a copy of that. The e-tron is $80,000, and there's no reason for it. The ID4 is a joke. The software is horrible. It's no good. It's not it. Nobody wants one.
That's no longer the case, right? They're building them now here in the U.S. The software has gotten better. Even longer term, they're looking at hedging their bets with Cariad and what they've now entered into with this joint venture with Rivian. So the prospects, I guess, are looking up for VW as it relates to that, assuming they don't go bankrupt again first.
Yeah, Volkswagen's just not in good shape. I mean, here's the most recent news. If you go to Google on the ID4, Volkswagen temporarily stopped selling the ID4 in September due to safety issues with the doors, and there's a recall, 98,000 units. That's all of them.
Yeah, not a good look.
I mean, that's not good. But I've sat in an ID4. It was a 23 model. It's way too much money for what you get. And the technology is, I don't know how else to say it nicely except to say it's poor. And the thing with the ID Buzz, the reason why I think the ID Buzz is just a yard ornament novelty is because that same subpar, not competitive software is what the ID Buzz is made out of. Now, the feature list, like especially on the top tier model, is insane. For me, if you put a Jetta beside an Accord, in 2004 and said, which one do you like better? I would have laughed at you. And that's how I've always felt about Volkswagen. It's just a laughing stock of the car industry. So
yeah, we had a Tiguan, my wife did, and we had such high hopes for that thing. We bought it new years ago, and it became an electrical disaster. So they still haven't seemed to have figured out power electronics. And
I ran a retail store. I was the store manager of a retail store in the late 20 teens. And one day, 2 Volkswagens caught on fire in my parking lot.
Yeah, it's the one brand that my wife there's probably more than just one, but that one in particular. After that experience we had with the Tiguan, she wants no part of Volkswagen. So yeah, I don't want to see them fail, but they would never get my business.
The new Beetle. Bring back the electric Beetle. Where's that at?
Doesn't that seem like a no-brainer? Can you imagine? You probably saw, what's the guy's name? Jason Camisa, right? His ID Buzz review, is called Icons, right? Because he went back and he did the whole history about the Volkswagen brand.
Yeah, it's a 20-minute short film on Volkswagen, like 5-star, perfectly produced, and a 1-minute review on the ID Buzz.
Exactly. But it was good to have all of that additional context about the Volkswagen brand.
I think you need it. I think you need all that additional context to convince a human being to want a Volkswagen.
Right. But it also made, I think, a really strong case as to why it just seemed like a no-brainer, right? Because they just relived that movie not that many years ago by bringing the Beetle back, right? And people went crazy. It wasn't a rational decision. It was an emotional decision, as it's often the case with a vehicle, right? But now imagine doing that and putting in an electric powertrain.
The electric Beetle would outsell any Cooper Mini, any Fiat 500, and by 10x. And then if you want to sell a cheap one, how about an electric Rabbit? The Rabbit, a lot of nostalgia on that car.
Oh, that's the ID2, right? No, ID3. That's not a model we're going to get here in the U.S. Right?
Another stupid play. Until automakers realize that they're 50% of car buyers are just trying to be able to afford a new car and they can't, then you're just going to have this problem. Those same compliance cars that came out 10 years ago, sell them again. See what happens. I think technology has moved far enough, and the attitude around electric vehicles is so different. If you brought back all those compliance, the electric Focus and the electric, the original, the electric smart car, if you brought those back at anywhere near those prices, obviously they'd be higher. I mean, there it is. And also, you don't need to make them that much more expensive, because the whole problem is you're building these massive SUV. Like, my Prologue is the same size as a standard Escalade. Like, the footprint is an Escalade, and it doesn't need to be. My mom was like, man, I love your car, but it's so big, I would never buy it. And like, she is obsessed with it. She's like, it's so beautiful and it looks so good. It's too big. Build some small vehicles. Make something affordable. The only way to make them affordable is to make the battery smaller. The only way to make the battery smaller is to make the footprint smaller, and they won't do it. Like you said, obvious. The Beetle, obvious. It's a win.
Yep,
for sure. And I think we've covered it all. At least
drained the swamp again, man. I absolutely drained the swamp again here tonight.
I look forward to it. It's always a pleasure. Brian G, the EVOG. This is on my channel. Definitely go over to his channel. He's got tests of the NACS adapter. He's got his entire experience with his Model 3 being stranded and the motor being replaced. Long road trips with the Rivian R1T down to 0%. And many more videos to come, as well as a beautiful comparison we did a two-part of on the Cybertruck and the second generation R1 series. Brian, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much, and we will convene again on your channel.
Sounds good, Adam. Thank you, and thanks for watching. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Take care.
Hey, smash the like button.
Thank you.